an infinite regress of causes can exist, that's another postulation. If we say an infinite regress of dependent things can exist, that's a third postulation, and they're not all the same. So what I'm saying is, if the claim is, what is the claim? Is the claim that there can be an infinite regress of dependent things or causes or?
Yeah, so an infinite regress of cause and effect trains.
Yeah.
And then because they go back infinitely, there is no first one necessarily, but it makes sense that if all of the things are set out in the same way and all produce the same thing, they are necessitating everything else.
And do these things have the quality of dependence as well?
No.
So for example, we said that this abstraction is dependent, it's contingent. So you're saying that, okay, someone caused this, so it has both the quality of dependence and cause. It's been preponderated, so it has, a cause is in the dictionary something which brings rise to phenomena, right? All right, so this has been brought rise to, so it's been caused from that angle, right? But also a dependent thing in the dictionary is something which relies on something else. So just to be clear, is your claim that this is both has the quality of dependence and cause, and that there can be an infinite regress of either or one of them only?
So I guess it's dependent on the previous action of the previous
right,
cause,
okay.
Right? Let's say that the bottle machine.
Yeah.
It's dependent on that thing and it working. And I think that thing's existence, again, the bottle machine, was caused by someone who wants to make a bottle machine, and then it goes back, right? So
eternally.
Yeah. So these things are cause and effect, and that is dependent on the previous thing.
Okay, good.
But like,
so both.
As Alex O'Connor, as I'm sure you know, about the P implies Q.
Who's Alex O'Connor?
If P is necessary,
cosmic.
The boy. Okay.
The boy. Yeah, if P implies Q and P is necessary, Q is necessary.
Okay.
Right. So in which case, if I'm saying that all the causes before this thing that is an effect and has been caused and is dependent on these causes, as long as those things that it's dependent on are necessary, I think that the entire chain
and if that's, look, if it depends on what we're saying, why P entails Q, and P is necessary, therefore Q is necessary.
Yeah.
Which is like 101 of propositional logic, modus ponens. But what I'm saying is that if we've already conceded to the fact, if you're saying that God is necessary, therefore what comes from God is also necessary. We accept that as the case from one perspective. What I was objecting to, by the way, in that thing was that I was saying that if you're saying P entails Q and Q is a necessary existence, because P is a necessary existence, there's a problem here. This was where we were talking cross purposes. But going back to the point, now if you say this has both the quality of causation and dependency, then you can have an infinite leave it, it's fine, it's okay. Yeah, and so it can have the quality of dependency. What we're saying is, my argument in counter to you will be that to argue ad absurdum, okay? I would say if you have an infinite regress of dependent things, then you would have to concede that infinite regress of dependent things is independent. So the set of all dependent things is dependent, whether it's infinite or finite.
Like dependent or independent.
So the
infinite regress.
So the infinite regress that you're speaking about, fine, no problem. Let's accept that it can happen. So we're saying let's accept that there can be an infinite set or a set of dependent things. We accept it, no problem. Yeah, like this one, that one, me, you. We're all dependent, no problem. So we have a set now which is infinite independent things. But that set, according to you, would then have to be independent, therefore.
No. Oh yeah, independent.
Yes. So the set itself has taken the form of an independent set. So in other words, now the set has become necessary from contingent. Correct? Okay. Now what I would say to you in response is that anything that is made up of component parts is contingent. Now the reason why we're saying that is, as we've explained before, is if something is susceptible, anything susceptible to additional subtraction is limited.
But I don't think it is. So like,
how?
In theory, we could conceive of that camera stand being there, or this person like this. We can conceive of that, but that doesn't mean that it could actually be the case, you know? I'm not convinced, because in some ways it's impossible to prove that this world could have existed in the same way if that. No, but what I'm saying is, even if it's composed of pieces, doesn't mean to say that it could exist differently. So if that camera stand wasn't there, we can conceive that the world would generally be the same. But it is logically impossible to prove that we could have experienced the same thing, because we're experiencing the world where this camera stand is there. So because it
no, but now you're. I'm not sure if I'm reading you correctly, but are you talking about the definition of necessity, which talks about everything being one way, not the other way?
Yeah. So if you're saying that because it has parts, it's contingent, and I'm not agreeing.
Okay. So what I'm saying to you is that we have to now explain why I said that. All right. In the beginning of this conversation, I said something bereft of a quality, for the most part, which you agreed with, cannot produce it. Okay. Now, what I mean by something bereft of a quality cannot produce it is like nothingness is bereft of somethingness. Therefore, if you add nothingness to nothingness, you just have more nothingness. I'm saying that there is no critical mass point at which you add nothingness to nothingness to such an extent that somehow you get something. Would you agree? You keep adding zeros to zero, you have zero all the time.
With nothingness, yeah.
No,
Right.
but that's what you're doing. He's saying.
No, what I'm saying is that contingency works in the same way as nothingness does. So, because the principle at play is the same. The principle is that something bereft of a quality cannot produce it, with a few exceptions, and that's where the fallacy of composition comes.
Yeah, but so I think because there are exceptions, I think this.
Okay, well, no, I'll tell you. So the exceptions are this, and this might sound a bit complicated, but I will just lay it out for you, right? The exception are, if the adding of something to something else increases the whole in either size, intensity, or protraction, then the whole is differentiated from the part. So, for example, if I say this day is long, it doesn't mean just because the day is long that every single part of the day is long. If I say that the elephant is big, it doesn't mean because the elephant is big, every single atom of the elephant is big, because it can be made of small parts. What I'm saying to you is that the exception to the rule, which is that something bereft of a quality cannot produce it, is in cases which, if the part is added to another part, the whole is increased in any way. If a part is added to another part, the whole is increased. What I'm saying is that there is no evidence, no empirical or any other kind of evidence, just like there's no evidence that when you add nothing to nothing, you have something. There is no evidence, and the burden of proof is upon the one that's making the claim. So if I'm saying that there is no evidence that when you add contingency or dependency to dependency, that you have independence / necessity, then you would have to demonstrate to me how adding contingency to contingency at any point can bring about necessity.
Yeah. So I mean, it's really tricky to talk about infinity, right? As I'm sure you understand. It's not like a thing that we can really conceive of. And same thing with infinite regress. We were assuming infinite regress wouldn't be like an entity. It wouldn't possess an infinite amount of real things. Almost. It seems like complex to think about it. But I would say, even though adding infinity. So, infinity add 1 is infinity, but it's also like a different type of infinity. In the same way as there are different types of infinities in scales, right? So
no problem.
There's an infinite amount of numbers between 0 and 1, an infinite amount of numbers between 0 and 0.1. They're just different scales of infinity. So,
like Zeno's paradox and all that.
Yeah, similar. So in the same way as we could have an infinite regress, and like I still think their constituent parts are different to the whole. They're treated differently.
Yeah, but by the way, what I'm saying does not negate the fact that you can have an infinite regress of things.
Yeah, but that won't make it independent.
No. I just want to delineate what I'm saying with what you're saying. You're saying that you're making the argument, which is a fine argument. You can make it, which is again, for example, David Hilbert, whatever his hotel example, that if you had a hotel with an infinite amount of people and you have another person come in, then is there another person that comes in or not? So. You're making an argument for the possibility of an infinite amount of things in the world. I'm saying, notwithstanding that argument or whether or not that argument is true, I'm saying is opposite, is irrelevant to that in many ways.
Is that you're saying that it only matters if adding something changes its size, and I think adding one line of cause and effect does change its size.
Not size. I said size, intensity, or protraction. So
if something
and or.
Yeah. So like. In the same way as one H2O molecule doesn't constitute wetness or a tide, but if you add loads of them and add into the size, you have an emergent property, so it's different, right? And this is, I think, one of those examples.
Say that again, sorry. Say that.
So, like, if you have one water molecule, it's not wet, and it's not like you have a tide. If you have loads of them, it is, because as you said...
No, but it's innately that molecule is wet. When you add it together, it makes a bigger...
No.
Yeah,
just
but the property emerges, right?
Yeah.
When you add to it. In the same way as you said, the atoms of the elephant, and the day, and they all apply. But I think this is one of those examples, because yes, you are adding 1 to infinity, which seems like it's staying the same size because it's infinite. It's a different scale of infinity.
No, but I'm not negating the fact that you can have an infinity in the real world.
No, but
do you see that? Do you see what I'm saying?
I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that point. What I'm saying is that when you say that there are exceptions to the rule, when you talk about like you can't keep adding. Nothing.
Sorry, so I think we're talking cross purposes. So let me just. I'm not making an argument for an impossibility of an infinity.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah, okay, so I'm saying that even if you believe in infinity,
Yeah.
what I said was that it depends on an infinite amount of what?
Yes.
So if you have non-entities and you add non-entities to non-entities ad infinitum, yes, you'll still have non-entities.
Yeah.
So if you add 0 to 0 ad infinitum, you still have So what I'm saying is that the principle at play is that something bereft of a quality cannot produce it. And I've given you the exception to that rule, which is that unless by adding a part to the whole, it increases its basically size, its intensity, or its what do you call it, protraction, it's extension basically. Now, I accept that you can put emergent properties together and it can bring something new, something emergent.
And I think this regress applies to that rule.
No, but what I'm saying here is there is no evidence that when you add contingent things to contingent things, there's any critical mass point where it actually turns into necessity. There's no evidence of that. So in order for you to say that there is evidence of that, you have to show us physical evidence, empirical evidence, or I mean,
can I just quickly summarize what you said? Very simply. If I had 1 billion nothings, would I ever get something? Okay. How is it that you're saying if we have infinite contingent things, we will get something that is necessary?
Because I don't think.
Because you said no to one, but you're saying yes to the same thing, which is the same example.
Because I think in the same way as you said that the exception to this rule of adding something and getting something else, the difference is like nothing and something is that by definition nothing is the absence of something, right? I don't think by definition like necessity and contingency are the exact opposite, and I don't think the existence of one would negate.
No, they're not the exact opposite. The opposite of necessity would be impossibility, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so in fact, impossibility is a kind of necessity because it's like a square circle necessarily does not exist, right? So contingency lies in the middle between the two categories. So what I'm saying here is that there has to be evidence, like folks, because it seems to me like, with all due respect, you both seem to be very polite. But what I'm saying is that you're skeptical. You're very skeptical when it comes to evidences of truth of God, but you're open to something which you're unable to provide any evidence for.
So the reason I'll justify it is that I'm not like the way I've described it as if I do believe it. My argument is that this could be the case.
Yeah, but you have to show how.
No, so this is the difference. I don't, right? Because I've got, if I have two possible things that could be true, if one of them's not disproven.
Okay. So let me tell you. Okay, I accept. So now let's shift the. Sorry, this keeps coming back to me. Let's shift the burden of proof back on me. These are my claims. So in order to negate or to affirm your position of a possibility of adding contingent things to contingent things ad infinitum or even on a limited level, and somehow there's a critical mass point at which it becomes necessary, the following must be disproven then.
But I'm not looking to prove it.
No, I'm saying the following, what I'm saying is must be disproven. So I'm saying is that the general principle at play is that something bereft of a quality cannot produce it. And that the only exceptions to this quality is that if you add part to whole in a mereological way, that somehow the set is changed or it becomes bigger in somehow or more. There's some intensity difference or some. So unless you have that, then there will be it will be commensurate. The part and whole, there will be a commensurate relationship between part and whole. It will not be differentiated mereologically. So what I'm saying at this point is, if this is my claim, and I'm saying that anything you bring into on an empirical level, as an investigation to this claim, anything you bring will affirm this point. Any example, any analogy, any inductive point, it will affirm this point. So in other words, if you put things together scientifically under a microscope, what I'm saying will still remain integrous. So at which point now you have to say, actually, give me a counter example of a situation in which you can add part to whole and the whole will be different if the part whole relationship is not differentiated in the ways that you have to give a counter example of that.
Yeah, so the idea that if you keep adding something, so like if your friend used like add nothing and nothing to nothing and you won't get something. I think it's slightly different. I think we both slightly agree that the instances of necessity and contingency.
No, I'm saying it's the same. I'm saying contingency and nothingness work in the same way.
Oh, okay. So, But either way, the idea is that I understand the argument that if you say that a group of dependent things, which I've conceived, creates an independent thing, a necessary chain, which is I also believe. What is almost the number? Like if three dependent things on a necessary chain, and what's the number? But the difference is when we look at like adding one, what's the critical mass point? We can't understand the critical mass point because infinity isn't just a really, really big number. Like it's a completely different concept. So it's not that I've got 100 links. I add one. Well, that doesn't make an independent chain. I add another one. It's not. You're not looking at a case of adding really, because it is an infinite. It's not a number.
Okay, so I'll say, look, I'll say no problem, but you have to concede 2 points here. That you have to take two very clear, logical leaps of faith. You have to believe infinity could exist. Not only that, but there's some way in which, if you add dependent things together,
I'm going to go into
that it somehow becomes necessary, despite the fact that we know that the principle at play is that something bereft of equality cannot produce it, except with the exceptions I've given. So you kind of had to endure the contradiction of, okay, I'm living a life, I know that there's no way of me proving that this is a possibility even. I'm not telling you to prove that this is the case. I'm just asking you to show me how this could be the case.
Well, the reason it could be the case, so the idea is that the reason it could be the case is the probability isn't zero. The only way the probability could be zero of that thing existing or being possible is if we disprove it completely. And I don't think so. It's not because I'm not really making a positive claim. The burden of proof isn't on me. And
I'm making a positive claim.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, so my belief system is that if this claim hasn't been disproven, the idea of infinite regress, and I don't think it has sufficient.
No, infinite regress we don't have a problem with.
No, I know. But I'm saying because this whole idea could exist, I don't have to prove it. I'm saying it could exist, and another one about a God, a necessary being, could also exist. I don't need to choose between the two. As long as these two things could be the case, I can be agnostic, right? So I don't need to prove, okay.
No, but in order for you to live put this in psychological terms. In order for you to live, put in Richard Dawkins' words, for you to be an intellectually fulfilled agnostic or whatever, or he said Charles Darwin made him an intellectually fulfilled atheist. All right, I'm saying if I were you, and I want to live as an intellectually fulfilled atheist or an agnostic, I have to be able to not show the existence, not of infinite regress, of a possibility of an infinite amount of contingent things coming together and producing necessity. I'm not saying to do it on an empirical level, at least on a conceptual level. And what you have not been able to do is this. So you have not been able to show how it's conceptually possible, considering the general principles at play that we accept for everyday life, and in logic in general. You have not been able to show conceptually how, despite the fact that something bereft of equality cannot produce it, except in certain mereological circumstances, that you want to make an exception for this rule when it comes to contingency, and you haven't shown conceptually how that exception can be made. So now you have to live with that, endure that basically contradiction, if you like, or that difficulty.
I wouldn't say it's necessarily contradiction. Like I said before, I'm not making an active claim about anything. So I'm saying that if I am, people ask me like why it's very easy to have this discussion with an atheist, someone that like believes that there is no God, because they would have a burden of proof. But I don't, because I'm not making an active claim. So all I'm saying is that unless all these other options are disproven, I have no logical reason to believe in one over another, right? So this idea that it sounds absurd, infinite regress and whatnot, I have to prove that it exists, or
once again, infinite regress I don't have an issue with right now.
No.
My issue is
all these other things. Even if I haven't been able to prove them, it doesn't matter, because if you don't disprove them, they're still a possibility, and if it's still a possibility, like if
it's a given that something bereft of equality cannot produce it, and it's also a given that the exception to that is that when you add part to whole, that there's some increase.
Which I think
so if you add these two things, if these two things are givens, that A, something bereft of equality cannot produce it, and B, that and B, which is except that if you add part to whole, that there's an increase in part in whole. Sorry, if you take those two things as a given, which is that there's no attempt to disprove these 2 points, then it follows that there cannot be a limited or an infinite amount of contingent things that at any point will produce a necessary thing, which means that it also follows that there's a necessary existence. If that follows, if there's a necessary existence, then everything depends upon that, and it depends upon nothing. This is our conception of God.
No,
Anyways, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, brother. Yeah, take care. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Where should I put these?
Hijab.
Yeah.
And you will go in?
Yes.
Okay.
Sam.
Oh, this is Scdawah. Which one is Scdawah? This one?